Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Mormon Sunday School with Radio Free Mormon, where you're going to learn things you're never going to hear in regular Sunday school. Let me put up on the screen the first slide. This is lesson number 5. It's from the Come Follow Me manual for the LDS Church, Book of Mormon, First Nephi, chapter 16 through 22. This is lesson number 5, covering January 29th through February 4th of 2024. All right, so let me go ahead and let's begin here. The storyline in First Nephi 16 through 22, the main points are this. Number 1, the Liahona is found and guides the group through the wilderness. 2, Nephi is commanded of God to build a ship. He's opposed by his brothers. 3, with the addition of little Jacob and Joseph to the family, the group sails to the promised land. 4, Nephi makes small plates to cover the same time period as the large plates, and it's very important that he tell us about that for some reason. 5, Nephi starts quoting chapters of Isaiah 48 and 49 in First Nephi 20 through 21. And finally, Nephi prophesies of the last days. This is a bit surprising because earlier in Nephi's vision, chapter 14, we had learned that this was supposed to be John the Baptist's, not John the Baptist, John the Revelator's gig. But apparently, Nephi can't resist, and he forgot the injunction he received from the angel. And he goes ahead and he talks some about the last days there in chapter 22. Now, out of all of this subject matter, what we're going to focus on is one verse, and that verse is First Nephi chapter 19, verse 8. But we have to read 7 to give it the context. We're talking about Jesus. For the things which some men esteem to be of great worth, both to the body and soul, others set at naught and trample under their feet. Yea, even the very God of Israel do men trample under their feet. I say trample under their feet, but I would speak in other words. They set him at naught and hearken not to the voice of his counsels. So we're definitely talking about the God of Israel, who in the Book of Mormon is Jesus. And now, verse 8, the 600-year prophecy. And behold, he cometh according to the words of the angel in 600 years from the time my father left Jerusalem. Now, we're left at a bit of a loss as to who this angel is that Nephi's talking about him that gave him this 600-year prophecy, because it sort of appears out of nowhere in the text. We're left to conclude or surmise that Nephi is referring back to the angel who gave him that panoramic vision in 1 Nephi 11 through 14, and that he managed to omit that detail when he was recounting it with his vision. So now he's going to go back and apparently amend the vision to add the detail that during the vision, the angel also told him that Jesus would be coming in 600 years from the time Lehi, or my father, Nephi's father, left Jerusalem. So this raises a number of problems, this 600-year prophecy that we just read. First off, when did they leave Jerusalem? Remember, the prophecy is that Jesus will come 600 years after Lehi leaves Jerusalem. So when did they leave Jerusalem? Well, 1 Nephi 1:4 tells us, for it came to pass in the commencement of the first year of the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah. That's where it all starts. My father Lehi having dwelt at Jerusalem in all his days, and in that same year there came many prophets prophesying unto the people that they must repent, or the great city Jerusalem must be destroyed. So that is our one data point for the chronology here. It starts, the Book of Mormon does, in the first year of the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah. Now, we can also date their departure from Jerusalem in this way. If Lehi were still at Jerusalem during the first year of the reign of Zedekiah, as the Book of Mormon plainly states, he must have left Jerusalem sometime after the first year of the reign of Zedekiah. See how simple this is? He had to have left after Zedekiah began his first year of his reign. So when was the first year of Zedekiah's reign? Well, Zedekiah was the 20th and final king of Judah before the conquest of the kingdom by Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon. After the siege of Jerusalem in 597 BC, Nebuchadnezzar II deposed King Jeconiah and installed his uncle Matanyahu instead, changing his name to Zedekiah. So this is already after the siege of Jerusalem in 597 BC. that Zedekiah is going to take the throne. The prophet Jeremiah was his counselor, yet he did not heed the prophet, and his epitaph is, "He did evil in the sight of the Lord." William F. Albright, no slouch in old world studies, William F. Albright dates the start of Zedekiah's reign to 598 BC, while Edwin R. Thiel gives the start in 597 BC. All right, and then it goes on that reckoning. They can try and figure out when it was Zedekiah was born. The main point for purposes of this podcast, however, is that scholars have pinpointed Zedekiah's reign starting in either 597 or 598 BC. That's a problem because Lehi and company could not have left Jerusalem before 598 BC. Making this a little bit more clear, hopefully, if Lehi and company had left Jerusalem in 600 BC or BCE, as we call it today, then that 600-year prophecy would have been correct. The problem is Lehi could not have left that early. He had to leave after 600 BC because the Book of Mormon itself pinpoints King Zedekiah as having started the first year of his reign at the beginning of the Book of Mormon before Lehi has left. So, the earliest date for the start of Zedekiah's reign, we have William F. Albright dates the start of Zedekiah's reign to 598 BC, while Edwin R. Thiel gives the start in 597 BC. So, the earliest date is 598 BCE for Lehi to have left, if he left within the year or shortly after the commencement of the Book of Mormon. Houston, we have a problem. Nephi claims the angel told him Jesus would come in 600 years from the time my father departed Jerusalem. We read that. Lehi doesn't leave Jerusalem until sometime after the beginning of Zedekiah's reign. Zedekiah's reign did not begin until 598 BCE at the earliest. Ergo, Jesus did not come and could not have come in 600 years from the time Lehi would have left Jerusalem. It's a shorter time period than that. But it gets worse. Not only do scholars agree Zedekiah did not commence his reign until 598 BCE at the earliest, scholars also agree Jesus was born earlier than 1 BCE. The scholarly consensus on the year of Jesus' birth is predominantly centered around the period from 7 BCE to 4 BCE. This range is mostly derived from the evidence given to us by the Gospel of Matthew. Ed P. Sanders observes, most scholars, I among them, think that the decisive fact is that Matthew dates Jesus' birth at about the time great Herod died. Herod the Great, died. This was in the year 4 BCE. So they know when Herod the Great died. And so Jesus was born in that year or shortly before it. Jesus could not have been born after Herod died because Herod plays a pivotal role in the Matthean account of Jesus' birth. He's alive by the time Jesus is born, or at or near the time Jesus is born. This was in the year 4 BCE, and so Jesus was born in that year or shortly before it, because we have to account for the fact that Herod the Great was still alive. Some scholars prefer 5, 6, or even 7 BCE, but you can't get any later than 4 BCE because of Herod the Great's death. If the earliest Zedekiah commenced the first year of his reign is 598 BCE, and if the latest year Jesus was born was 4 BCE, then the best case scenario for the 600-year prophecy is that it is off by 6 years. At best, it would have had to have been a 594-year prophecy, but it's not. It's very clearly a 600-year prophecy, but it can't be right because 600 years will not get you to the year of Jesus's death. You will be too long in your prediction. In other words, the most faithful interpretation of the evidence appears to be that Jesus was not born 600 years after Lehi left Jerusalem, but only 594 years after Lehi left Jerusalem. I'm smiling because I regularly get ahead of myself on the slides and I start talking about the subject. I go to the next slide and I've already put it in a slide. There's an additional problem with the 600-year prophecy, all right? And this has not to do with Jesus's birth, but it has to do with the order of the translation of the Book of Mormon. There are two competing theories. There's the first Nephi priority, or just the Nephi priority, and there's also called the Mosiah priority. I'll explain what these are. The essential background you need to know is this: Joseph began translation of the Book of Mormon with the Book of Lehi. Remember, with Martin Harris? This comprised 116 pages. The 116 pages were subsequently lost, and after a period of months, Joseph began to translate again. The question is, where did Joseph commence translating again? Many have assumed Joseph would have started with First Nephi and translated his way through the end of the Book of Mormon, This is the First Nephi priority theory. Mosiah priority is just what it sounds like, but the evidence is very strong that Joseph Smith actually recommenced his translation, not with First Nephi, but with the Book of Mosiah. That's why it's called the Mosiah priority. The evidence is so strong that the Mosiah priority is correct. Pretty much all Book of Mormon scholars, believing and non-believing, agree with the Mosiah priority. Even the apologists agree with this. I mean, that's how universally it is accepted in Mormon studies. And I took this quote from Book of Mormon Central, the preeminent defenders of the faith and apologists for the LDS Church. This is their quote. Many readers of the Book of Mormon naturally assume that Joseph Smith translated its books in the order that we find them today. That is, beginning with the title page and then translating 1 Nephi 1:1 through Moroni 10:34, i.e., from beginning to end. It may be surprising to learn that the books from the small plates of Nephi, 1 Nephi through Words of Mormon, almost certainly came last in the translation process, after the completion of Mormon's abridgment of the large plates of Nephi, Mosiah through 4th Nephi, followed by the books of Mormon, Ether, Moroni, and the title page. So you can see that even church apologists, even the faithful members of the church, believe the Mosiah priority is correct. Now, this comes from an article at Book of Mormon Central titled, "How Does the Mosiah First Translation Sequence Strengthen Faith?" I think what we're going to find out is that whereas they may have a point there, I'm not exactly sure. I think that there's another side to that, and that the Mosiah First priority creates problems for the Book of Mormon, but gives us insight into what was going on during its production. The problems it creates for the Book of Mormon have to do with it being a historical record. And here's the discoverer of the Mosiah priority, Brent Metcalf. He discovered this and published on this, I think it was in 1993. It's been over 30 years ago now. But he discovered this, he published on it, and the evidence that he has adduced for the accuracy of the Mosiah First priority has convinced pretty much everybody in Mormon studies that it is the correct answer to the question, where did Joseph Smith start retranslating the Book of Mormon after he got the plates back? So, when was the 600-year prophecy dictated by Joseph Smith? Now that we understand the Mosiah priority, we can see that all of 1st and 2nd Nephi was translated after the rest of the Book of Mormon was translated, right? Which means that the 600-year prophecy was dictated after the rest of the Book of Mormon, from Mosiah to Moroni, was produced. Make sense? Let's see where this goes. So what is the problem? An angel telling Nephi that Jesus would come 600 years after Lehi left Jerusalem would be hugely important. The Nephites have the key to predicting the year of Jesus' birth, and they have it from the very start of their story. It would not be surprising if the Nephites actually created their calendar based on this understanding. Spoiler alert, they don't. The problem is that nobody else in the entire Book of Mormon, this is important, nobody else in the entire Book of Mormon ever mentions this 600-year prophecy again. Even when the Book of Mormon is discussing the timing of Christ's birth to come, they seem completely unaware that the key to the entire thing is sitting right there on their own plates in the 600-year prophecy. So here's the first example of two with regard to that. Samuel the Lamanite. Helaman 14:1 tells us, and now it came to pass that Samuel the Lamanite did prophesy a great many more things which cannot be written. And behold, he said unto them, Behold, I give unto you a sign. For 5 years more cometh, and behold, then cometh the Son of God to redeem all those who shall believe on his name. Well, maybe Samuel the Lamanite knows about the 600-year prophecy from Nephi, and he has just subtracted 595 years from it. So he knows there's only 5 years left for this 600-year prophecy. That would make sense, but that's not what happens. Samuel the Lamanite tells us where he gets his 5-year prophecy, and it's not from Nephi. And that's what I say here in this slide. Helaman 14:9 tells us, And behold, thus hath the Lord commanded me, Samuel speaking, by his angel, commanded me by his angel, that I should come and tell this thing unto you. Yea, he hath commanded that I should prophesy these things unto you. Yea, he hath said unto me, Cry unto this people, repent and prepare the way of the Lord. So Samuel does not get his information that Jesus is going to be born in 5 years from Nephi's prophecy. No, he attributes this information to an angel who appeared to Samuel himself directly. It's a strange thing, isn't it? He seems to have absolutely no awareness of the fact that Nephi had already prophesied that in 600 years from the time Lehi left Jerusalem, the Savior would come. Example 2, remember the Nephites who were to be killed at Christ's coming for their faithfulness? 3 Nephi 1:1. Now it came to pass that the 91st year had passed away, and it was 600 years from the time that Lehi left Jerusalem. This is critical. Notice here that Jesus is about to be born, and the signs are going to be given that Samuel the Lamanite talked about. 3 Nephi 1:1 mentions the very fact that it was now 600 years from the time that Lehi left Jerusalem. And it was in the year that Lyconius was the chief judge and the governor over the land. Now, this passage actually mentions the 600-year time period. That's why it's fascinating. It's a 600-year time period, but it doesn't do what we would expect. It fails to link that with Nephi's prophecy, when you would expect that that's where it would be put. The other thing about this is, I had thought, well, the 600-year prophecy of Nephi, is that really 600 exact years, or is it just sort of a rough approximation? Is there leeway for another 6 years to be off? As we've demonstrated, it has to be off by at least that much. But here, 3 Nephi 1:1 corrects that idea and says, no, it's actually 600 years, because it says 600 years from the time that Lehi left Jerusalem. It is now that point in time. And they're going to see the signs of Jesus's birth right here in a few minutes. So 600 years means 600 years. The problem is that when the Book of Mormon doubles down on 600 years, really meaning 600 years, it shows that that prophecy is not accurate because it's off by at least 600 years. But we know at a minimum from this, even though it doesn't reference that prophecy, which we would expect it to, that really Nephi was talking about 600 years. And there's the next slide, but no mention of Nephi's prophecy. Instead, all the focus is on Samuel the Lamanite's prophecy being fulfilled. Samuel the Lamanite's prophecy from 3 Nephi 1:5. But there were some who began to say that the time was past for the words to be fulfilled, which were spoken by Samuel the Lamanite, not which were spoken by Nephi the prophet, but which were spoken by Samuel the Lamanite. And this is 3 Nephi 1:5, and it goes on into verse 6. And they began to rejoice over their brethren, saying, Behold, the time is past, and the words of Samuel are not fulfilled. Therefore, your joy and your faith concerning this thing hath been vain. And you recall the dramatic scene where they're about ready to be executed for believing in Jesus and not denying him and believing that he's going to come. And then the sign shows up, and they are vindicated in their belief. So why would this be? Why would it be that Nephi gives a 600-year prophecy in 1st Nephi, but thereafter it appears that nobody in the Nephite chronology ever heard of it? If this were an actual history, and Nephi says an angel said Jesus would be born 600 years after his father left Jerusalem, one would expect there to be subsequent references to that prophecy all the way down to the birth of Jesus 6 centuries later. But we don't find that. Instead, it appears for all intents and purposes that the Nephites are completely unaware of Nephi's 600-year prophecy, for they never mention it, even in contexts where you would expect them to mention it. The Mosiah priority, once again, almost universally accepted by believing member and non-believing member alike, the Mosiah priority solves the riddle. If the Book of Mormon is not a history, but a creative work by Joseph Smith, and if, as we have seen, Joseph commenced retranslating the Book of Mormon as we have it today from Mosiah, then Nephi never uttered this 600-year prophecy until after the rest of the Book of Mormon was produced. This is one instance where the Mosiah priority theory has explanatory power, i.e., it explains things in the text that are otherwise problematic. The Mosiah priority solves another riddle. The Mosiah priority suggests that the Book of Mormon is not a historical text, but a literary work, at least in this instance. If Nephi were a real person who recorded this real 600-year prophecy, we would expect subsequent writers to mention it. But if Nephi is a literary character who never uttered the 600-year prophecy until after Joseph had produced the rest of the Book of Mormon, it makes perfect sense that no other subsequent literary character in the Book of Mormon mentions it, because from their perspective, it hadn't been written yet. And that is the conclusion of this first riddle that is solved by the Mosiah priority. But there's another problem that's solved by the Mosiah priority. And I'm going to give you a little more background on this first, so it will make sense. And it's the subject of Isaiah in the Book of Mormon. Entire chapters of Isaiah are quoted in the Book of Mormon, as you probably know. First Nephi has two such chapters. First Nephi 20 and 21 quote Isaiah 48 and 49. Second Nephi, however, really pulls out all the stops when it comes to quoting Isaiah chapters. Second Nephi 7 and 8 quote Isaiah 50 and 51, or through 52, 1 through 2, technically, but basically 50 and 51. Second Nephi 12 through 24 quote Isaiah 2 through 14 nonstop. That entire block is quoting Isaiah chapters. This totals 17 chapters of Isaiah being quoted, with 15 in Second Nephi. Indeed, there's stories and jokes made about that in Mormonism. One of them has to do with a Mormon missionary back in the 1930s or so being assigned to the Southern States Mission. He knocks on the wrong door. He's met with a rifle instead of a welcoming smile. He takes off with his companion, starts running away, and the guy gets a shot off from his rifle. The missionaries are unharmed. They get far enough away, and they stop and they say, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay." "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay." And the one missionary pulls out his Book of Mormon, and there's a bullet hole in it. The bullet hole in his back pocket had actually stopped the bullet from the rifle, or so the joke goes. And the missionary holds up his Book of Mormon with the bullet hole in it, and he says, "Yeah, nothing gets through Second Nephi." Okay, so that's the joke. Maybe you've heard that. Maybe you've heard a joke like it. But the idea among Mormons is it's funny because of all the Isaiah chapters in Second Nephi, it is famously difficult to get through that book and continue reading because you get bogged down in Isaiah. Are the Isaiah chapters in the Book of Mormon mostly filler material? Is the question I have here. We know that Joseph Smith is coming to the end of his translation when he gets to Second Nephi, right? Because he's going around the horn and coming back to Mosiah, and that's where the translation will stop. It's where it starts at the beginning of Mosiah. It's where it ends right before the beginning of Mosiah. But Joseph also has a certain number of pages he may feel he has to produce to correspond with the 116 pages that were lost, or at least be somewhere in the neighborhood. Is it possible Joseph Smith was running out of ideas for his narrative, but with many more pages to fill, he quoted all these chapters of Isaiah for the primary purpose of filling out the rest of the Book of Mormon? Note, this is the only place this is done in the Book of Mormon. Now, when Jesus shows up to the Nephites, sure, he'll quote He'll quote one chapter of Isaiah and one or two of Malachi, but that's it. Nowhere else do we see Isaiah being quoted with such fervor as in Second Nephi. Is there a meaning behind that? Is there an answer to the question of how come this occurs so prevalently in Second Nephi and not in the rest of the book? The ending of the Book of Mormon, the ending. This is a hypothetical question. If we looked at the Book of Mormon chronologically, and if Moroni had ended his book at the very end of the Book of Mormon by cramming a long string of characters together who don't do or say anything noteworthy, it might look like the author had simply run out of ideas and was trying to run out the clock and get to a certain time period that constitutes the finish line for the Book of Mormon. In other words, if we got to Moroni and it wasn't the way Moroni is today, but instead it's just a bunch of minor characters who don't have anything to say or do, but they're just handing off the plates one to another in quick succession, it might look like the author is trying to fill up time and just get to the finish line, right? That he's out of ideas. But isn't that what we see? But isn't that what we see in Enos, Jerem, and Omni, which is the real ending of the Book of Mormon, at least in its translation sequence? Remember, according to the Mosiah priority, Joseph's retranslation of the Book of Mormon, that's the commencement of the retranslation, would have commenced with the Book of Mosiah. That means it would also have ended at the beginning of the Book of Mosiah. What happens in the Book of Mormon immediately preceding the Book of Mosiah, or in other words, at the end of the dictation process? Answer: we have a long string of characters who don't say or do anything noteworthy, as if the author is just trying to make it to a predetermined point in the narrative, i.e., the beginning of the Book of Mosiah. He's got to make it all the way to the point where Mosiah starts in the chronology. Let's look at the book of Enos. Now, Enos, he has a story. It's really sort of an event, just one event in his book. Enos gets a 2-page book right after the book of Jacob. So Jacob gets 7 pages. Enos gets, 7 chapters. Enos gets 2 pages. The book of Jerem. Jerem is a less than 2-page book where he says nothing of any consequence. How many times is Jerem quoted in church? That'd be pretty much 0. But the book of Omni really takes the cake as we get closer and closer to the commencement of the book of Mosiah. Omni hands the plates to Amaron, who hands the plates to Chemish, who hands the plates to Abinadam, who hands the plates to Amaleki. Is Joseph Smith playing for time? This type of situation with author handing off the plates to another author, an author within the Book of Mormon text narrative, in such quick succession happens only here in the Book of Mormon, leading up to Mosiah, just like the Isaiah chapters. Is this a coincidence? If this happened at the end of the Book of Mormon in Moroni, it would look suspiciously like the author had run out of ideas and was just listing names to get to the finish line. But the Mosiah priority tells us that 2nd Nephi, Jacob, Jerem, and Omni, and Words of Mormon actually are the end of the Book of Mormon when it comes to the translation process. Conclusion. And I'm going to have, I think, 5 questions in my conclusion. Question number 1. Did Joseph Smith add 17 full chapters of Isaiah in 1st and 2nd Nephi because he was trying to find material to fill out the narrative? Question number 2. Did Joseph Smith run through a bunch of character names in Enos, Jerem, and Omni because he was out of ideas and just had to make it back to the starting point for the book of Mosiah so he could call it quits and the translation would be over? Question number 3. Does the Mosiah priority help us understand why so many Isaiah chapters are found in 2nd Nephi? Question number 4. Does the Mosiah priority help us understand why a compressed list of many Book of Mormon characters are found only immediately leading up to the book of Mosiah? And finally, question 5. Does the Mosiah priority make the Book of Mormon look less like a historical text and more like a work of literature? All right. Well, let me get back to my screen. Excuse me. There I am. Okay, now I can see myself again. So that is Sunday School for today, all based upon this one 600-year prophecy by Nephi. And what we have seen is that that prophecy is problematic on a number of levels. First off, it cannot be correct. Even though 600 years obviously means 600 years, we've seen that from the text, it can't be 600 years. It has to be at least 6 years less than 600 years. So the prophecy itself is incorrect. But not only that, we begin to see that the way the Book of Mormon is structured with the Mosiah priority shows us that Joseph Smith, when he's producing the Book of Mormon, when he's translating the Book of Mormon, when he's dictating the Book of Mormon, when he gets to the end of the dictation process in 2nd Nephi, he begins cramming in chapters of the book of Isaiah, 14 of them, or actually, I think 15 of them. Yes, it's 15 of them in 2nd Nephi. I mean, 2nd Nephi only has 32 chapters, almost half of them are Isaiah. This is significant. And is it because Joseph Smith was getting filler material for his book? And then finally, we have, of course, the last number of people, the record keepers in Enos, Jerem, and Omni, which looks like Joseph Smith is just trying to fill in the gap with as much people as he can to bring it up to the place where he has to stop, which is at the beginning of the book of Mosiah. So thank you very much for coming to Mormon Sunday School with Radio Free Mormon today. Please hit like, please hit subscribe, please leave a comment in the comments section. Please tell your friends and family about this show. And please join us next time for Radio Free Mormon for Mormon Sunday School with Radio Free Mormon. Once again, I'm having to look over here. I have to click end recording, and then I have to click end recording again for some reason, probably because they don't want somebody to accidentally click on it once and end the recording prematurely. But now I've got the cursor on the second end recording button. I will bid you good day and wish you a very, very happy time studying the Book of Mormon with Mormon Sunday School. Good night, everybody.